खास बातचीत की हमारी संवाददाता कृति मिश्रा ने।
Hello and welcome viewers. You're watching the special presentation of Sansad TV with your host Kriti Mishra, and joining us are two very special guests: Finance Secretary Mr. T.V. Somanathan and DIPAM Secretary Mr. Tuhin Kanta Pandey. Welcome to Sansad Television, both of you, and thank you so much for joining us. This is your moment, sir, and let me begin talking about the Indian economy. What a decade of transformation it has been for us. In 2014-15, we were at 10th position. We've been elevated to 5th position, harboring the plans to become the third largest economy. Sir, going ahead, how does this interim budget further cement our economic progress?
As you know, the government has set itself the goal of a Viksit Bharat by 2047. That is a marathon. When you want to run a marathon, you keep yourself in good health. And to do that, our macroeconomic fundamentals have to be very sound. So the government has clearly taken a position that we will work on this as a long-term goal. And to achieve that long-term goal, we will not do things which distract us from that path. And so we've followed a path of macroeconomic stability, prudent financing, a combination of a good increase in investment expenditure, while at the same time paying attention to consolidating our debt and becoming less dependent on government borrowing as a source of growth.
Well, absolutely, government borrowing, we'll just talk about it in just a bit, sir. But talking about the fiscal policies, the prudent policies, sir, the fiscal deficit target has been lowered to 5.1% for FY25. Clearly shows that the government is adhering to fiscal glide path, adopting very prudent policies.
Yes, this is the finance minister had made a commitment in fiscal year 2021-22 that we would reduce the fiscal deficit to below 4.5% by 2025-26, and we have actually adhered to it. This year we will be consolidating by slightly more than what had been budgeted, and next year we plan to achieve a further consolidation of 0.7% of GDP. And we are committed to that goal, and we are doing it in a manner that is mindful of keeping growth sustained. So we are not doing it too quickly, and at the same time we are not doing it too slowly either. So we are trying to do it in decent increments, 0.7% this year, which would make the target within striking distance in the following subsequent financial year.
So it's a judicious balance. While talking about the disinvestment targets for financial year 2025, the target is pegged at 50,000 crore. What is the roadmap ahead?
First of all, I think we have to really comment that we are investment and public asset management. We should look at it together. So we aren't really, sort of looking at disinvestment in a disjointed fashion. But we are looking at wealth creation, the value creation, and then of course, when we sell our shares to the public, we distribute that wealth. In last 3 years, we have created a value in the market cap of our 61 listed companies, and 16 PSBs and PSICs, public sector insurance companies, have risen from 15 lakh crore to 58 lakh crore, which means wealth creation, a value unlocking of 42 lakh crore. So we are talking of very big numbers here in terms of their economic impact, the impact on the minority shareholders who have picked up shares. So disinvestment or dividend or capex or the capital performance of the enterprises have to be looked at into that context. I think this particular new paradigm we have to understand, rather than actually always focusing our view on a short-sighted one number, which is disinvestment. The point is that if you don't have value, you will only realize the value that you have. If you don't create value, and you create the value by performance and by communication of that performance and calibrated disinvestment strategy, looking at both dividends as well as, again, possibility of disinvestment together, but in a calibrated manner. So that is what I think we have attempted in terms of actually looking at together. And the minority shareholders, they would vouchsafe for it that their capital gains and their dividend have really benefited them, and so is the government.
So that's a very valid point, but I'll raise another legit question. The target has been downscaled to 30,000 crore for the current financial year. Of course, there are complications and issues with each state government. How do you plan to resolve that issue going ahead?
The target is not downscaled to 30,000. Next year target is 50,000 crore. But
So for the current financial year?
Yeah, for the current financial year. The reason is that, if you are not able to conclude certain transactions, then that will happen. The second is that when we are in the midst of a very heavy value creation, would you like to, for example, if I were to ask you, how would you dispose of your wealth? Now, when you are saying that imminently you are getting a 15 or 20% gain, would you not much wait for that time, for 3 months to make that gain, or you would like to just dispose it? Because the question is,
that's right.
In the overall scheme of things, when we have a budget of 47 lakh crores or the total size of the budget, this is a very small amount. So we can always, and we have got good revenues. The point is the wealth effect, the benefit of wealth effect is far, far larger, far too larger than to be looked at into merely, a 20,000 crore or 10,000 crore.
Absolutely.
So that's the point I'm trying to make.
Absolutely, sir.
We are deliberately not setting specific, internal targets within this amount for how much is disinvestment, etc. Because as he says, we have come to the conclusion that this should not be pursued as a matter of filling fiscal deficits or holes in the budget. This should be viewed as asset management, optimum asset management. Sometimes it means selling the share, sometimes it means holding the share and taking the dividend. And sometimes it means rebuilding the asset or, making it more profitable. So that is a more appropriate way of managing the assets of the government, the way a private investor would manage his or her own assets, rather than using it as a, fire sale in order to make up some money in the current budget. So that's a conscious shift.
Well, absolutely. It's a dynamic strategy depending on the situation. But so talking about the capital expenditure, the outlay has touched record high of 11.11 lakh crore. Sir, how do you see the impact on employment generation particularly, and of course investment?
I think there are clear studies, economic studies, both theoretical and empirical, and including studies specific to India, which show that capital expenditure by the government has a very high multiplier effect. So typically 1 rupee of capital expenditure by the central government produces over a period of time a GDP increase of 2.5 rupees. So, and that in turn, and also the nature of the capital expenditure that the government is incurring, most of it is in labor-intensive sectors, whether it's railways, highways. These are sectors where there's a lot of construction work involved, and that's very labor-intensive. So not merely are we increasing capital expenditure, we are increasing it in sectors which have high labor intensity. So I think this is one of the major ways by which India will continue to absorb those who are coming from the schools and colleges into the employment market, and both for skilled and for unskilled labor. And I think sustained capital expenditure will also help trigger private capital expenditure, which in turn will create job opportunities of its own. So I think it's the right strategy, and it's the strategy for the long run. It may not produce immediate results, but it will produce very strong results in the long run.
Well, absolutely, sir. And before we wrap up this conversation, closing comments from both my guests. Sir, India could become a $7 trillion economy in next 6 to 7 years, the way ahead.
So I think the way ahead is broadly indicated in our budget. The main directions in which the economy will move forward. And I think our commitment is to keep pursuing those objectives with vigor and with sincerity.
Sir, your thoughts?
I think the way ahead is to continue with our initiative of bringing efficiency and effectiveness into what we do, because eventually, what you actually do, profitability and so on, that is the one which will help you grow and generate the resources.
Well, absolutely. All the very best for all your future endeavors, and thank you so much for joining us on Sansad Television. With camera person Yogesh and camera assistant Riyasat, I'm Kruti Mishra for Sansad Television.